Okay. Well, thank you very much for the warm introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. Um, how many people in this room is this their first Web3 summit? Can't actually really see, but okay. Well, for those of you, welcome. This is one of my favorite conferences in crypto, and it's a pleasure to be back here. I was here 5 years ago, the last time they held it, and it's a pleasure to be on stage speaking to you all today about something that we just talked about at length in the last panel. And I'm very happy to be following that last panel because at Aleo, which is actually, I now lead the foundation. So I'm the executive director of the foundation, former CEO of the company from which the foundation split. Aleo privacy is something that we've thought about a lot. And I really believe that it is the missing link for Web3 adoption. And I'm going to tell you why. So, and I'm going to give you guys bottom line up front kind of talk here. What's the solution? The solution is Aleo, and Aleo is launching in the next couple of weeks. And if you buy the Aleo token, all your privacy problems will be solved. At the end, that's the talk. No, I'm just joking. I think I have to talk for 20 minutes, so I can't just give you the simple answer. And it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I want to go in a little bit more depth about why privacy is important, first of all. And second of all, I want to take a slightly different tack than I think some of the other people who you may have heard before. And hopefully, my perspective and this perspective that I'm going to present will help make you think about some of the ways around how we can actually make this technology real and practical. So first off, who am I? So like I said, I'm the executive director of the Aleo Network Foundation. I was like the chief everything officer at one point at the company before. I think I had every C-suite role minus the CTO. And I was an investor before, and I founded two initiatives for ZK, specifically ZK, Z Prize and ZK Study Club, which I do in concert with Anna Rose, who's the founder of the ZK podcast. But that's not what got me into crypto. I got into crypto because I used to have a very different job. I was an American soldier. This picture of me is from 2010, almost 15 years ago, when I had a lot less gray hair in Afghanistan. And I spent time in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, and my experiences there, shaped who I am. In many ways, I'm very proud of that experience. But in many other ways, I felt ashamed of being there and doing what I did in those places. And in particular, I felt sympathy for many of the people who lived in those places under, let's say, an occupation regime that the American military was effectively undertaking in Afghanistan, or at the mercy of authoritarian governments, as in Syria, that despite a variety of governmental efforts, we could never unseat. And so I feel as though the legacy of the American military in the Middle East left a lot of suffering in its wake. And it made me contemplate the way in which many people around the world who are not in this room, or not in this region, or not in the West generally, basically have no choice but to accept the lot that they're given. But blockchain technology and what it portends is an opportunity to increase global liberty worldwide, not only in the digital sense, but in a very real, tangible sense. And so that is my background, and that is why I came to crypto. That's why I spent the last 7 years of my life in crypto. That's why I'll probably spend the rest of my life working in this industry, because I believe it can truly make a difference. Now, what are we going to talk about today? So I just mentioned why I think cryptocurrencies could potentially change the world. I think this is the most important technological innovation of our time, especially in light of the fact that many other technological innovations kind of focus on increasing the power of centralized systems. AI, I think, is a great example. The organization that has the most data will have the most advanced model. They can potentially have the best predictions, right? And so it's obviously a winner-take-all kind of dynamic, where everything is kind of driving towards the center, whereas cryptography generally, and blockchains as an application of cryptography, tend to push out power into the edges of a network. And I think that's a very powerful thing, and it's a very novel thing because it's unlike many other forms of technology. And if you take nothing else away from this talk, the thing that I would like you to take away is that we need to change collectively as an industry our views on how we achieve the goal. A goal being the adoption of blockchain technology because of the good it can bring, because the increasing liberty it can bring to the world. But the way we've gone about it up to this point, in my opinion, is wrong. We've gone about it in an idealistic manner. I think idealism is what really has driven the space from the very beginning. And I'm a very idealistic person personally. I mean, I spent 10 years of my life putting my life on the line every day for what I believed in. Whether or not it was good or not, none didn't matter. The risk was still there, and therefore I think that makes me an idealistic person. But I think that what we need at this point is less idealism and more pragmatism. And that's why, even though I'm going to talk about decentralization, even though I'm going to talk about privacy, I think that what we see today in terms of cryptocurrency adoption, the most promising area is stablecoins, and frankly, custodial stablecoins. And while some people, I think, may see that as a disappointment from an idealistic perspective, I actually think from a pragmatic perspective, this is a very promising development, and I think we should orient, and in fact, Aleo as a blockchain is oriented around that development specifically. And I think the silver lining of this is that as stablecoin adoption grows worldwide, I think it starts to become a bigger and bigger feature in people's lives, and I think the more people think of this in the same way that they think of their traditional, bank or payment processor or whatever, then I think the need for privacy starts to become obvious in a way that when people are just speculating on something, and when crypto is the giant casino that it is today, people don't seem to care about privacy as much as I think they would when their actual financial life is on chain. So that's what we're going to talk about. And like I said, I want to really kind of hammer home here that I think it's important that we all remember that we have to take a realistic view of the world, and it's not sufficient to just describe what we want the world to be. We have to describe the world as it is and figure out how we're going to chart the path from A to B. Hopefully, I'm going to talk a little bit about Aleo. Hopefully, I'll be able to convey to you why I think privacy is really critical for all of the various applications of cryptocurrency that I think are relevant. And I think, again, what is the point here? The point is to make lives better. It's not just to make money. At least it's not why I'm here. Obviously everybody likes to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. But I do think this technology has the potential to be so much more, but it has not lived up to that potential yet. And so hopefully we can change that. Okay, what am I not going to be talking about? Nitty-gritty details on the Aleo protocol. I've spent 4 years building Aleo. I can talk at great depth on all of the choices we made and all the designs, et cetera. But this is not a what talk. This is a why talk. I'm happy to answer questions at the end about kind of the what is Aleo specifically in detail, but we're not going to get into very low levels about how the Aleo protocol works. I'm not going to, so this is a talk about privacy. The P word is privacy. I'm not going to tell you how zero-knowledge cryptography, upon which Aleo it's the technological foundation of Aleo. I'm not going to tell you why that's better than like T's or fully homomorphic encryption or multi-party computation or any number of other techniques that help guarantee privacy. My view is all these different approaches have trade-offs, and in fact, I think the perfect approach ultimately will encompass a combination of all of them. So just wanted to say that up front. Lastly, I'm not going to create new word salad for crypto Twitter. I really think that this is one of the worst things about our industry is that we like to, generally speaking, all reinvent new terms for the same thing. And so I'm going to endeavor to try and avoid that here, though I've been guilty of it in the past. So, okay, great. So I'm going to kind of just start off here. So hopefully with that frame setting, I'm just going to start off here with some truths about the industry. So first off is there are a lot of smart people in this industry. I think many people talk about this is the reason why they came in this industry. So this is Vitalik, obviously, you guys know Vitalik. Gavin Wood, who's somewhere around here, incredibly smart man. Many, many smart people have laid the foundations for this industry technologically. But in my view, many of these people focus on the theoretical versus the practical, right? And I'd like to use an example of David Chaum. Who knows who David Chaum is? David Chaum is like a legendary cypherpunk. He invented the first digital currency called DigiCash, invented Tor, a number of other things. Who knows what David Chaum's cryptocurrency is? Anyone name it? Oh, one person. Okay, great. So my point is this, is that David Chaum, despite being a genius who has given us many theoretical breakthroughs, has not built something that has really made the world different, at least in the context of crypto, right? So his cryptocurrency, just because he's David Chaum, does not mean his cryptocurrency is destined to be successful. And just because Vitalik Buterin is the founder of Ethereum and everybody respects him does not mean that Ethereum will be relevant 20 years from now, right? And this is what I'm saying is what I think what we need, and this is again, as I'm going back to the point that I'm trying to emphasize in this talk, is we need more emphasis on pragmatism and less emphasis on theory. Okay, and I think the second truth I want to talk about is the commercial success of crypto. Way back in 2019, when I said I was first here, you can see the chart. We were at, I think, what is a 400 billion market cap. I don't know why I picked a random date in August 17, but 400 billion-ish market cap in 2019, last Web3 summit. Now we're at a $2 trillion market cap. That's a huge success, right? It's great. The values of everything, number has gone up for everybody. Some people got rich and bought yachts, and that's great. But I think if we look at crypto in the context of the entire financial system, it is still not very big, right? So all of NASDAQ, just not even all of NASDAQ, the top 10 companies in NASDAQ are worth $18 trillion. All of crypto, the vast majority of which is Bitcoin and Ethereum, is worth $2.1 trillion, right? Now, if you just control for basically the market cap of tokens, and you look at just businesses that make money in crypto, that brings you now down to a number closer to $400 billion. But if you take out all the exchanges, which are basically like you could view as the cash out desks in the casino, you are left with just a small number of companies that actually do business in crypto that make real revenues, the biggest of which is Ripple, which is the exception that proves the rule, because Ripple, of course, has the XRP token, which is on their balance sheet. And that's primarily how they make money as a company. So my point is that most of this is not actually doing much for the people that I talked about, based on my experience in the Middle East, like people in Afghanistan, people in Iraq, people in Syria, other than potentially being able to buy some asset and getting a little bit wealthier. This is not technology that has fundamentally changed lives. And I think you can see that just based on the fact that there's fundamentally relatively little use of this, and there's very few companies in the space that actually leverage it. Okay, and I think we can also probably, let's do a little exercise. Who here receives a paycheck in cryptocurrency? Okay, I think so. It's kind of bright in here. I see like 5 or 6 people. Okay, so keep your hand up if you receive it in a non-stable coin. Okay, so about half of those people receive it in something other than a stable coin. And then keep your hand up if the entirety of your income comes in the form of crypto. Okay, so a small handful, right? This is pretty typical when I ask this question at a lot of conferences. So we, I think, are the main users of our own products, Web3 people, right? But for the most part, even in this room, very few people use this for their own paychecks, right? People like me get up on stage, and I say this all the time, crypto is the future of finance, but I don't even get my entire paycheck. I get some of my paycheck. Obviously I've compensated in the form of, Aleo tokens in some way, but I don't get the majority of my day-to-day paycheck in crypto, right? So all of us, including me, in some sense are hypocrites, right? Most of us. There's a few people in this room who are true believers, and I cheer for you. But I guess what I'm saying is that I think this also proves to me that we are not in a place where this technology is relevant. By the way, I would absolutely happily take my paycheck in crypto. In fact, and for many reasons, I believe it's superior for even a Westerner like me, as compared to my bank. But these tools don't exist, and these products don't exist because there's not enough pragmatism, I think, around building products that people can use. There's a lot of emphasis around building cool new protocols that take some new research paper and try and implement it, and there's not enough focus on real-world adoption. But I do think related to paychecks, I think stablecoins actually have been the one case where adoption, I think, is pretty consistently up and to the right. And here's a chart showing stablecoin growth over the last 5 years or so. You can see here, USDC has kind of gone up and down, but Tether in particular has gone up relatively consistently. And by the way, this chart isn't even accounting for one of the network that Tether is most used for payments on. Does anyone know what the most popular network for Tether payments is in Africa or the Middle East? Tron. Someone said it. USDT on Tron. actually is probably the most used cryptocurrency when it comes to payments. And I know that was shocking. I mean, it's deeply upsetting to me that Tron, I mean, I don't know how everyone feels about Tron here. I find it to be a little bit less than ideal in terms of its commitment to decentralization, et cetera. But nonetheless, it is true that people actually use stablecoins issued on Tron in that case, and also on Bitcoin and USDC for depending on your region. People use these things every day. Now, for the most part, I think people are just looking for exposure to dollars in the third world. But that's actually great in many ways. I think this is I think, the beginning of, I think the outlines of what real world adoption could look like. And even though these are both custodial stablecoins, there's a bank somewhere that's holding these assets, you got to trust them. Does that defeat the whole purpose of crypto? Maybe it does. But I think as a starting point, I think it's impossible to ignore the fact that I think this has more real world adoption than virtually any other use case we can point to in crypto. And that's why I think it's interesting. And again, I think what people generally are using these things for is dollar exposure, but hopefully over time, my hope and I think a pragmatic view of this could be that basically this is just the first step into exposing the broader population of people around the world to cryptocurrencies, to blockchains, and helping them to understand how they work. And ultimately, as more and more as a greater and greater percentage of their wealth goes into a stablecoin, then potentially they'll be able to be wanting to do things like payments or wanting to have financial, like savings, et cetera, all be on chain. And in that world in particular, I think you must have privacy. So why don't people care about privacy today? Maybe this is just, let me state it plainly. Up to this point till today, no one cares about privacy. Not no one. Few people in cryptocurrency care about privacy. I think you just have to look at the market cap of like Zcash to convince yourself of that. But I think in a world in which stablecoins are an increasingly important part of the global financial system, and where individuals have a greater and greater percentage of their wealth in stablecoins, privacy is going to be critical, just like it is critical in the everyday UX of the banking system, right? So Aleo is built around this whole idea, right? Aleo is built, because what does a stablecoin need? So first off, you need a smart contract, basically for escrow, with possibly some authentication or authorization measures to prevent bad people from using it. And you need privacy. So smart contracts and privacy. So Aleo is basically built on this idea of needing both of these things. And it's an implementation of a paper written by the Zcash co-founders called Zexy. And the simple way to think of it is like Ethereum and Zcash had a baby, and it's Aleo. Another way I like to describe it is just as an evolution of these systems, right? So first, I always like to say that like Aleo is not a replacement for Zcash, it's not a replacement for Ethereum, it's not a replacement for Polkadot, none of that. This is just a different approach here with its own trade-offs, but again, pragmatically speaking, oriented towards the real world financial system, which again, I think we all need to be mindful of. Okay, so the big TLDR of Aleo is that it offers permissionless, programmable, privacy-preserving. It's a privacy-preserving, permissionless, programmable platform for decentralized applications, right? And so I've kind of laid out here how I think we fit in this like tri-Venn diagram that I made. And we have three components of this. I'm not going to go into depth, as I said at the beginning of this talk. It's Snark VM. So Snark VM is really the core. It's the equivalent to the EVM, right? So this is where the computation happens. This is where the zero-knowledge cryptography is, right? So users basically deploy are using programs deployed on chain. They're referencing those programs as well as their private inputs and generating zero-knowledge proofs from them. Those programs are written in Leo, and so this is what a developer's interface is for Aleo. So Leo is a domain-specific language that helps basically take high-level logic and compile it down to circuits, which is kind of the low-level representation of these programs in zero-knowledge. And then Snark OS is a blockchain, and the only thing I would say about this is that we've worked hard to make sure that the system is actually decentralized. There's no centralized sequencer. There's no single prover. All of this is privacy preserving, but also permissionless. And I think one of the reasons we did it this way is we really are focused on not only privacy, but scalability and efficiency, right? So I think because we were able to purpose-build a blockchain from the ground up that's all about verifying zero-knowledge proofs, you can do that much cheaper than you can on a platform that is designed to do any computational task, right? And so what does that imply? Well, it implies that Aleo may not be the perfect thing for every smart contract that you could conceive of, right? But it is optimized for verifying zero-knowledge proofs. And I think that is a very big advantage, and one of the big advantages of this model is that if you're only doing the verification of a proof on chain, you outsource the actual computation and the proving part off chain. And so that means your runtime for your smart contract is unlimited effectively, right? You no longer have to worry about a gas limit, et cetera. So going back to why I think, oh, my little circles got messed up here. Not sure why those are different sizes. Why this technology is important. Again, we talked about, I think for stablecoins, you need smart contracts, right? You need to be able to define this, like, hey, this is the parameters of how many stablecoins I'm issuing. This is like how people are going to spend it. If I need to freeze something or something, this is how I do that. Smart contracts are needed. And you also need privacy. I think one of the things, actually just getting back to the panel that we just had up here, I think somebody mentioned identity. And I think identity and payments and finance go hand in hand, because the first thing, every time I talk to an exchange, for example, they're like, hey, how are you going to prevent money laundering on Aleo? Hard balls come right out the gate for me, typically. And I think identity is the answer here, because I think in the same way that zero-knowledge cryptography enables privacy for payments, you can also use that to develop a better compliance system. And what we've done at Aleo is trying to build, build a toy example of this, a product called ZPass, which implements a paper called ZK Creds. And the idea of ZPass is basically being able to prove you're 21 years old using an identity document that the US or that any government issued you, right? And so you can basically take a real-world issued document, verify the signature associated with that document. So like for a US passport, at least, they have an NFC chip with like all the data, it's signed. So you verify that in zero knowledge, you prove that that signature is valid, and then you can issue a credential on chain, and then with that credential issued on chain, because it's, Aleo, every individual record is encrypted, you can prove facts about it without revealing anything else about yourself. So in this case, in ZPass case, it's just proving you're over 21, kind of like the canonical get into the bar example, or get into the bar in the US, since I think that's where the age limit is 21. So you can just imagine how this can be used for all kinds of other things, right? Like KYC, or a variety of different compliance flows. And it even becomes very relevant, especially as we think about a technology I referenced earlier, which is AI. We think about AI-generated content online. So this is, I think, one of the areas in which identity even goes beyond finance and its potential applications, because digital identity has never been, it's never been solved, right? I mean, there's a reason why every time you go to like buy wine online, you have to just click a button and claim you're over 21, right? And in a world in which in a world in which the vast majority of content is going to be generated by artificial intelligence, I think it becomes increasingly important to figure out who is a human on the other end of the phone or on the other end of the link, and who is a machine, right? And I think this is what digital identity could potentially do, and this is why I think it's a really important use case, and I think it's a really important use case that requires smart contracts, aka programmability, privacy, so the entire world can't just see all your data, and a permissionless blockchain, because if you're just going to give all your data to Google, who cares? You might there's no reason to have any kind of permissionlessness, right? But I think for many things like social security numbers or health data or things like that, people have already proven, and in fact there are laws against just giving this up to whatever search engine provider. Okay, and I think this is maybe I'm getting close to the conclusion of the talk here, and I want to leave a couple minutes for questions. But I think the thing I would say here, ZPass is one approach to identity that I just highlighted. I talked about custodial stablecoins, and this whole talk has really been about Aleo and enabling financial applications and identity applications. And I would say that the beauty of decentralized systems is it enables the marketplace of ideas, right? There's nothing wrong with stablecoins like MakerDAO. MakerDAO is one of my favorite projects ever, right? It's a decentralized stablecoin. It's so cool. I love it. There's nothing wrong with that. I think WorldCoin and WorldID is doing a similar thing in the identity space to what I described, where it's like you scan eyeballs and you have some biometric database and you can prove you're a real human. I think that's also cool, right? But I think the approaches, more pragmatic approaches, I think have a greater chance of being adopted. But nonetheless, I think these decentralized systems provide, it's just a marketplace, right? So people will choose and ultimately converge on what the best idea is, hopefully. And I think back to pragmatism, I don't know if anyone knows this picture. This is a cover of Thomas Hobbes' The Leviathan, right? And this is probably a very unpopular slide to have at a crypto conference, but the whole idea of the Leviathan is that people, generally speaking, people's natural state is to abhor anarchy. And given the chance throughout history, people have constantly given up all their freedoms in exchange for not anarchy. right? And so while I don't think that's the end goal of what cryptocurrency should, should be, I do think it's important just to acknowledge the fact that most people in the world do not live in, nor are they ready for, an entirely decentralized from bottom to top system. And so that's why I think if we do believe that this technology has promise, and we do believe there are benefits, as I do, I think we just need to take a pragmatic approach towards driving adoption. And that's what I think, some of these ideas, and particularly what I think stablecoins are, in the suite of potential crypto products. So some concluding thoughts. So like I said, I think blockchains are one of the greatest breakthroughs of the 21st century, but that's not enough, right? Like we're here, it's worth $2 trillion, but if I go out on the street right now, it will take me 5 or 10 or even 100 people before I find anyone who actually uses a crypto-enabled product. And so I think because there are not very many people that use these products, we need to stop inventing new complex systems, and we need to focus on simplifying and making these things easy to adopt. And again, I think stablecoins are really an important part of this, and I think privacy, as stablecoins become adopted, are going to be essential, right? Privacy it's like the UX of the traditional financial system is private, right? My bank, of course, can see my account if they get a warrant, or if a law enforcement official can give my bank a warrant, they can see it. But generally speaking, everybody else in this room doesn't know what I have in my bank account, right? Like I said in my slide with the Leviathan, cryptocurrency does not exist in a vacuum, right? These things, like when I buy a house, my bank's like, hey, what are your assets? And I'm like, well, I own some Bitcoin. They're like, okay, show me, tell me about the Bitcoin you own, because they're trying to assess the value of my assets relative to the cost of the house I'm about to buy, right? The point is that we don't exist as like zeros and ones in a computer somewhere. I mean, maybe we do, but but with regards to like all of us as the human race on planet Earth, there are existing systems that we must just acknowledge exist. We can't ignore them. We can't pretend like everything's in network state right now. I think maybe we want to get there, or we want to move in that direction, but we have to understand that we don't exist in a vacuum. And I think lastly, and potentially going back all the way to the beginning of my talk, adoption of this technology is going to be a struggle. I think the last panel we talked about, a developer who created Tornado Cash, who's in jail right now in the Netherlands, right? Privacy-preserving technologies are very unpopular with governments around the world. And pushing this technology to be adopted is going to be difficult. And it will involve risk. And it will involve sacrifice. And I think most people, if you ask them to risk something or sacrifice something, people are willing to do it if they see a light at the end of the tunnel, right? If they're inspired by the ideas that you're proposing. But also they need to see that their sacrifice will matter, right? And that is why I think it is not enough for us to simply say privacy is important, you got to adopt it. I think we need to provide a clear plan and a clear pragmatic path by which we get from where we are today to a world in which your financial assets are yours on a permissionless ledger, and the ability to use them and or share information about them is yours and can be controlled by a technology like zero-knowledge cryptography. And I think that's important, and ultimately, hopefully, we get to a place where the people, like these kids who I left behind in Afghanistan, who are now living under the Taliban regime, they have hope for a better future for themselves, and they're not trapped in whatever authoritarian regime where they are, and have basically no hope to improve their lot or the lot of their children. So with that, I'm going to conclude. Thank you all very much for your time. I think I ended right on time. Thank you all very much.